The residual Baptist part of me wants to say, amen. Clarence Jordan was a farmer and a New Testament Greek scholar and a Baptist minister and a social activist. So he obviously wasn't your ordinary farmer or scholar or preacher or activist. He was born in 1912 in a small rural town in Georgia. As a kid, racism and poverty troubled him. At the University of Georgia, he majored in agriculture so he could help sharecroppers who struggled to make ends meet. In college, he realized the problems in society weren't just economic, but were spiritual as well. And so he enrolled in seminary, earning a PhD in the Greek New Testament. In 1942, he and his wife, along with another couple, started Koinonia Farms in Americus, Georgia. The farm was interracial, committed to social justice, especially to countering racism in the Deep South. And later in life, along with Millard and Linda Fuller, the Jordans started Habitat for Humanity. So obviously he lived what he believed. In the late 1960s, Jordan translated the New Testament into the colloquialism of the American South. He called it the Cotton Patch Bible, and some of you may be familiar with it. The letter of Paul to the Ephesians became the letter to the Christians in Birmingham, Alabama. Rome became Washington, D.C., the seat of empire and power. New Testament tensions between Jews and Gentiles became animosity of blacks and whites. Crucifixion became lynching. So listen to his version of the parable of the Good Samaritan. Wanting to see if Jesus knew his stuff, the teacher of an adult Bible class at First Baptist Church stopped him. "Who's my neighbor?" he asked. Well, Jesus laid into him and said, "Let me tell you a story. A businessman was going from Atlanta to Macon, and some gangsters held him up. When they had robbed him of his wallet and brand new suit, they beat him up and drove off in his car, leaving him unconscious on the shoulder of the road. Now, it just so happened that a white preacher was going down that same highway. When he saw the fellow, he stepped on the gas and went scooting by. Shortly afterwards, a white gospel song leader came down the road, and when he saw what had happened, he also took off. Then a poor black man came upon the fellow, and what he saw moved him to tears. He stopped and bound up his wounds as best he could, drew some water from his water bottle to wipe away the blood, and then laid him on the back seat. He drove on into Macon and took him to the hospital and said to the nurse, 'Y'all take care of this white man I found on the highway. Here's the few dollars I got, but y'all keep account of what I owe, and if he can't pay, I'll settle up later.' Now," Jesus asked, "if you'd been the man held up by the gangsters, which of these three, the white preacher, the white song leader, or the poor black man, would you consider to have been your neighbor?" The teacher of the adult class stuttered. "Why, of course, well, the one who treated me kindly." Jesus said, "Then you get going and start living like that." This story is ancient wisdom, but it is for us today. I want to begin by thanking Alan for inviting me back. So if this does not go well, you can blame him. I've known Alan for years. I taught at McHenry County College in the philosophy department for 35 years. Some students shuffle in, tired at the end of a semester. Others bound in, eager for it to be over. With Aristotle of Athens as our guide, we've spent 16 weeks thinking about human happiness and how to achieve it. We've explored philosophical and psychological insights on handling temptation, building willpower, repenting failures, and forgiving people who hurt us. We've discussed why drunk driving is stupid, what sexual consent means, and why we should be vegan. Now we're done. Well, almost. One last conversation remains. So, I began, Aristotle hints that it can be dangerous to take an ethics course. I wonder why. Puzzled looks all around. Then a brave soul ventures a guess. You learn everything you've done wrong and feel like a loser. Other voices chime in. You become judgmental. You start thinking every opinion is valid. You upset your parents with woke ideas. I gently swat each suggestion down. Listen to Aristotle's answer, I say. It's by doing just actions that the just person is produced, and by doing self-controlled acts that the self-controlled person is made. Without acting, no one would have any chance of becoming good. But most people don't act, but take refuge in theory and think they will become good in that way. They behave like patients who listen carefully to their doctors, but don't do the things they are told to do. Just as a patient won't be made well in body by such a course of treatment, so a student won't be made well in soul simply by a class in philosophy. Aristotle's point is that good habits are acquired by repeated practice. You don't become proficient at playing the piano by reading Piano for Dummies. You don't learn how to bat .300 by watching batting videos, right? You've got to sit at the piano until you got calluses on your fingers, and you got to spend hours in the batting cage. I love Aristotle's analogy. You feel like crap. You go to the doctor. Flu, she says. Get plenty of bed rest, lay off the booze, and take this medicine. Good advice, you say, as you leave, tossing the pills in the trash, stopping at the pub for a pint, and going home to mow the lawn. Really? You thought you'd get better by knowing in your head what you should do? Sorry, it doesn't work that way. You've got to do what the doctor says. And that's the danger of taking an ethics course. It's easy to think, hey, I'm scoring an A, I must be a good person. It's also the danger of teaching an ethics course. But knowing stuff in your head isn't enough. It's got to become action. That's Aristotle's bottom line. And of course, that's the bottom line of Jesus of Nazareth. In my class, we had already discussed the moral lesson of the parable of the Good Samaritan. Jesus' point isn't simply to call people to compassion and self-sacrifice. He's going way more radical. What he wants to do is trash tribalism, to disrupt our idea of who is our neighbor and who isn't our neighbor. And of course, that's why he picked the hated other as the hero of the story. But now, in my last class with my students, it's time to look at what prompted Jesus to tell that story in the first place. And so, here's the backstory. In Jesus' time, just like today, if you wanted to be an ethics scholar, you had to go to school and read way too many books. So Jewish scholars learned Jewish moral teaching inside out. And now along comes the local carpenter, right? He lacks academic credentials, but he attracts a popular following for his message of inclusive love. Now imagine how threatening that was to the guys with the PhDs. And so this rivalry grew up, and their favorite tactic became asking trick questions to see if Jesus was just blowing smoke. So we get our story. One day an ethics teacher stands up to test Jesus. What should I do to have a good life? Jesus responds, why are you asking me? You know the answer. How do you read the law? The scholar replied, love God, love my neighbor. Slam dunk, Jesus says. Do that, you'll be fine. The expert chuckles, takes a breath, and asks a follow-up. And who is my neighbor? Innocent question? No. You see, if you're in the neighbor circle, I have to love you. But if you're outside, I can hate you. I can deport you. I can drop bombs on you. I can take away your health care. And so there had been centuries of Jewish wrangling about where to draw that line of who's in the neighbor circle and who's out of the neighbor circle. And so this question, who's my neighbor, is a loaded question. It's meant to trip Jesus up because he can't break down the schools of thought. I mean, he forgot to get a PhD in ethics, so he's going to stand there and go, blah, 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 blah. And Jesus says, I'm not going to take the bait. I think I'll skip the academic lecture. Let me tell you a story. A traveler was attacked by robbers. The first one by was someone just like you who's given me grief, right? An ethics professor who knows it all in his head, right? And you know what that guy does? He walks right by and doesn't do a thing to help. To make matters worse, a second later, another guy who's schooled in moral doctrine comes along. He too ignores the traveler. Then, I like to think it was a tattooed biker on a tricked out Harley who shows up, right? He doesn't know jack about moral theory, but his heart's in the right place, right? He stops and helps the wounded man. Jesus pauses, turns to the ethics scholar. Now, which one of these three was a neighbor to the traveler? Folks, this ain't rocket science. And the ethics teacher, I can imagine him blushing with embarrassment, right? The one who stopped to help him. You don't say. Jesus looks him in the eye. Then go and do the same thing. Get out of your head and get out there and love your neighbor with your hands. So think about the religious types in the story, the priest and the Levite. They wanted to be spectators, not participants. And truth be told, I'm afraid that I'm a lot more like them than I like to admit. And maybe you are too. Too often our moral, religious, and spiritual traditions teach us how to be good people without having to actually be good to people. That insight comes from Black disability theologian Lamar Hardwick. It's a nice contrast, isn't it? Being good people versus being good to people. Think about how that one word, to, makes all the difference. When it's put that way, maybe I'm not so different from the priest and the Levite. There are days that I worry I'm a latte liberal, a hypocritical, left-leaning person who thinks all the right things but doesn't act on them enough because I don't want to bear the cost of the progressive policies I support. The priest and the Levite make me ask myself some uncomfortable questions. Do I support higher taxes on the rich while telling my accountant to minimize my own tax burden? Do I advocate for environmental conservation while practicing a high-consumption lifestyle that contributes to climate change? Do I express concern for animal welfare while eating factory-farmed meat and dairy products? Do I speak on behalf of affordable housing but object to it being built in my backyard? Do I claim to care about the struggles of people of color while enjoying white privilege that insulates me from marginalized communities? These are tough questions, and they make middle-class white folks like me uncomfortable with Clarence Jordan's bold reinterpretation of Jesus' teaching. Jordan didn't just make religious texts modern, he brought them into the heart of American injustice. His question was, what does Jesus' ethic demand from us today? So I wonder, how would a March 2026 retelling of the story go? Who is the needy victim? Who are the indifferent priest and Levite? Who is the compassionate Samaritan? How would you tell that parable today? I want you to sit in silence with that for a few minutes. if you've come up with a framing of the story, I'm going to encourage you to share it with each other during coffee hour. I think that would lead to some interesting conversation. It's possible, of course, for me to support progressive policies like higher taxes on the wealthy and generous welfare benefits while enjoying a comfortable lifestyle. But I worry about the sincerity of my liberal beliefs if I'm not willing to make personal sacrifices for the causes I say I support. It's easy to maintain the appearance of being a good person without practicing justice or mercy. To be like the priest and Levite, to see myself as a hero while I'm unwilling to be a neighbor. But then I remember, I can't be a good person without being good to people in concrete ways that cost me something. Aristotle, Jesus, same point. I got to do. That's the danger of having lots of moral formulas stuffed in my head. If I'm not putting them into practice, I'm just fooling myself. As Paul of Tarsus so aptly put it, I'm a sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. I'm just making noise. And I think that's why I find Clarence Jordan's life inspiring. Just a few minutes ago, we reaffirmed our values: interdependence, pluralism, justice, transformation, generosity, and equity. The question is, this week, how will I practice them in concrete ways? Actions do speak louder than words. So why am I belaboring a point that you already know, which is that we have to be doers, not just knowers? Because if you're like me, you forget and have to be reminded again and again and again. My perennial temptation is to think I'm a good person because I know stuff in my head. It's not true. I got to go and live my values.